Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Freshman Fundamentals. This week we're going to be talking about performance anxiety. If you struggle with it, you know it can be a big deal. But this week we're going to cover some strategies that you can use to cope. If you've ever experienced performance anxiety, you're probably familiar with some of the common symptoms. Racing pulse, dry mouth, trembling or sweaty hands, nausea, and potentially even vision changes. With all of this, performance anxiety can be a real hindrance to putting out the product that we've worked so hard to create. The reason that these symptoms come about is because our body is going into a fight or flight response to what is being perceived as an overly stressful situation. Generally, this response is triggered by life-threatening situations, but in modern life, we don't come across very many of those. It's important to keep in mind that your brain and body are just trying to keep you alive and safe. So hopefully we can take some of this energy and use it to our advantage. So why is a performance triggering our survival instincts? Well, even though we know that there's no danger out on stage, our body is still kind of expecting it. Though it's not physical danger, you are putting yourself at a social risk when performing. When you add the pressure of trying to obtain a degree or having family drive from really far away to see one performance, it's easy to see why social anxiety can be triggered or aggravated. At the end of the day, though, the anxiety stems from a negative view of performance or a lack of trust in yourself. Essentially, it's a fear of failure. One of the first things that we can do to combat these feelings is to be ridiculously over-prepared. You may have heard this before, but what does being over-prepared mean? Do you have a plan for every phrase in the piece? Do you know what each phrase is contributing to the whole message of the piece? How each note is going to contribute to each phrase? And can you execute each phrase perfectly every time? I'll be totally honest, I've performed recitals on pieces that I haven't known this well. And we can get away with making pretty good music just relying on our intuition. But if your subconscious is preoccupied with anxiety, it can be good to have a roadmap to fall back on. If you can break a piece down into its component parts, and you know that you're able to play those parts every single time, you'll be more confident in your ability to do this in front of others. Plus, it's just a good idea to do this with pieces, even if you're not struggling with anxiety. It's also a good idea to work with some kind of mindfulness practice, especially if this relieves stress for you. I did a whole video on mindfulness and the benefits for musicians, plus how we can use it in the practice room. So if you haven't seen that yet, I'll make sure that there is a link to it at the end of the video. But essentially, mindfulness is a kind of focus training, and it would be enormously valuable to be able to focus on the task at hand rather than the symptoms of anxiety that you're experiencing. Of course, this can be easier said than done. In your preparation, it's also a good idea to involve some kind of visualization practice. One of the reasons that we experience anxiety as performers is because we've either subconsciously or consciously visualized the performance going poorly. Dedicating some time to positive visualizations of the performance can go a long way in building your confidence on stage. And it can improve your grasp of the music. While you're visualizing, it's important to account for every single aspect of what's happening. Not just the music, but how the performance space looks, how the clothes that you're wearing feel, how it feels to play the music, how you're going to enter the stage, how you're going to exit, how you're going to bow at the end of your piece. Sometimes just knowing what's coming can make you more comfortable with it. Some of these things you're not going to be able to control, like the lighting or the temperature in the performance hall. So do a little research. Figure out what the performance hall looks like and how it feels to stand in it. With these things you can't control, knowing what they are is really the best you can do. But some of these things you can control. So maybe don't wear that dress that really digs into your shoulders, or don't wear that jacket that doesn't quite let you lift your arms all the way up. Speaking of things you can control, also consider your diet leading up to a performance. Aside from just eating healthier in general, which is going to help you feel your best on performance day, you can also avoid caffeine leading up to a performance. This can help alleviate some of those pre-performance jitters. If you already don't consume that much caffeine, you could also try a low-fat meal that's heavy on complex carbs, something like spaghetti. Because it takes more energy to break down these meals, there's going to be less energy devoted to these little nervous tics. Be careful with this one though. The last thing that you want on stage is a mix of anxiety and food coma. But anyone who's eaten too much on Thanksgiving knows that eating heavy foods can certainly settle you down physically. So these are a lot of little things that you can do in your preparation, but really the biggest thing is getting experience. In a lot of schools, ensembles only perform 2 to 3 times a semester, and sometimes your entire degree, 4 years, can all be leading up to one public solo performance. And what most professionals say when asked about stage fright is that the only way to get comfortable with it is just do it. A lot. So this doesn't mean that you need to set up a degree recital every year, but try and get some trusted friends together, maybe some teachers, and perform for them as often as you can. Maybe contact a local church and see if they want someone to play a prelude or an offertory. Or go to a nearby retirement home and give a short half-hour recital there. The key is finding low-pressure situations where you know the audience is going to be supportive. The more you do things like this, the more you'll be comfortable in front of an audience. So these are all preparation-based things that you can do to help with your anxiety. There are plenty of backstage tips and tricks that you can find on the internet through just a simple Google search. If you do struggle with performance anxiety, I encourage you to look some of these things up and give them a try. Some of them are going to work for you, and some of them won't. The same things aren't going to work for everyone. So before your performance day, experiment with some of these techniques. Whether it's breathing exercises, yoga or stretching, or just a centering technique, find out what calms you down the most so that you have a plan of action when the jitters set in. Before I wrap up, I just wanted to include some encouraging things that I found while I was doing some research for this episode. The first is that performance anxiety, while usually worst right before you go on stage, most people report that it goes away almost completely as soon as they start performing. So, all you have to do is make it to the performance. The second biggest thing that I found was that performance anxiety was not a predictor for performance success. I'll say that again. Performance anxiety was not a predictor for performance success. What this means is that people who were experiencing performance anxiety were achieving success at the same rate as people who weren't. Even if you walk off stage and feel like it was the worst performance ever, odds are it probably wasn't. Your performance anxiety affects your perception of how the performance went, not necessarily how it actually went. So, if you've put in the hard work, it's going to shine through. The last thing that I want to leave you with is that the audience is on your side. They all came out to hear you perform, instead of doing whatever else they could have been doing. Try and connect with your audience. Humanize them. It'll be more like playing to friends, instead of just playing to a room full of strangers. Thank you everyone for watching. If you liked the video, please hit the like button and consider subscribing. I also just wanted to say that if your anxiety seeps out of this specific situation, or you find it debilitating, it's always okay to ask for help. There's no shame in seeking therapy or counseling. If you'd like, I've included some resources below. I'll see you all next week for the last episode of Freshman Fundamentals.